Good morning. Welcome to the Tuesday, June 4, 2013 Board of County Commissioners meeting. It will begin by an invocation by Commissioner Davis, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Bob Solari.
Please rise. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity that we have to conduct the public's business. May we use your guidance, knowledge, and wisdom in the decisions that we make today. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, gentlemen. Next item on the agenda is additions, deletions to the agenda and the emergency items.
Move approval as presented.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by Commissioner Davis. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item on the agenda under proclamations and presentations is a presentation of proclamation of retirement award to Daniel Dietz in honor of his retirement from the Indian River County Board of County Commissioners, Department of Emergency Services, Fire Rescue, with 31 years of service. And I have the honor of presenting that proclamation. Good morning, Chief.
Good morning.
And good morning, Chief. Good morning. It's great to have you here. And we appreciate your 31 years of service. I personally have had the opportunity to work alongside of you in your capacity and my then capacity, and I want you to know that it was a tremendous honor to work alongside of you and actually under your tutelage. So I want to thank you.
Thank you, sir.
At this time, I'd like to present the proclamation as follows, honoring Dan Dietz on his retirement from Indian River County Board of County Commissioners, Department of Emergency Services, Fire Rescue. Whereas Daniel Dietz retiring from Indian River County Fire Rescue effective June 5th, 2013. And whereas Daniel Dietz began his firefighting career in Vero Beach Volunteer Fire Department on March 3rd, 1980. On October 3rd, 1981, he was hired with the South County Fire District as a full-time firefighter. On February 6, 1983, he became a firefighter EMT, and on July 7, 1984, he was promoted to driver engineer. On March 31, 1989, he was promoted to fire inspector for fire prevention. On July 3, 1992, he was promoted to Bureau Chief of Fire Prevention and to Battalion Chief for B Shift on October 25, 2002, which is the position he currently holds. Whereas Daniel Dietz served this county and the public with distinction, selflessness, and during his years of service, he was dedicated to his work, was greatly appreciated by the employees and co-workers alike. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that the Board applauds Daniel Dietz's efforts on behalf of the county, and the Board wishes to express their appreciation for the dedicated service that Daniel Dietz gave to Indian River County for 31 years. Be it further proclaimed that the Board of County Commissioners and staff extend heartfelt wishes for success for his future endeavors. Duly adopted this 4th day of June, 2013. In addition, Dan would like to give you the customary plaque that I trust you'll have an office at home, and we hope that you're not a stranger here in Indian River County to assist in your words of wisdom. This is certified that Dan Dietz is hereby presented this retirement award for outstanding performance and faithful service to Indian River County Board of County Commissioners for 31 years of service on this 5th day of June, 2013.
Thank you very much.
Dan, we know that you're a man of words, and we would count on nothing less than you to talk a little bit for us.
Okay. Well, gentlemen, first this morning, I just want to say I'm very proud to have served with my fellow employees with this fire department and serving this county for this number of years. There's so many people I need to thank. Backing into my fire prevention days, working with our own staff, with Bob, Stan, Esther, Wayne, Russ, Buddy Akins, all the officials that we have. We have so many good people internally working here. On the outside, the professional firms, Donatio's office, John Dean, Dritton Bass, all those working professionals. When they come to the fire department, they're not always going to hear good news from us regarding codes and what they need to do, but internally and externally, everyone has always been professional, and it always worked out. On the suppression side, the sheriffs, the police chiefs that I've worked with in my tenure, again, have all, we haven't always agreed, but we've always worked together and gotten what we needed to accomplish. And I personally really appreciate that. I know Chief King has brought some issues to you recently about what the future holds. And just speaking from my current position, I was talking with Chief Wells the other day, and the two gentlemen that have been selected to fill our position, both nearing 25 and 25 plus years of service, they're going to do a great job. They're going to come right in and fill our spots without missing a step. So I hope the public realizes what they have coming in behind us. And with that being said, I've sat here before a number of commissions, and knowing several of you for quite a long time, I'm glad to be departing in front of this one. So thank you. I hope I've served well, and I appreciate what you've said here today.
Well, Dan, and thank you. And you just epitomized what was in that proclamation about selflessness in true spokesman-like manner that I grew accustomed to know you so well. You spoke of the environment, you spoke of your colleagues, and you spoke little of yourself. And that's a great tribute to you. Thank you for your impact here in Indian River County.
Jeff, thank you very much.
He was a ride-along.
Thank you, sir. You're too kind.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan.
We'll see you at lunch.
Absolutely.
Dan, congratulations. Thank you very much.
very much.
You bet. Thank you.
Chief, don't go too far. Next item on the agenda is the public announcement for hurricane preparedness. Are you ready? Memorandum dated May 25th, 2013, and we have Vincent Burke here today as well as the chief. And, well, the floor is yours. Let's get him ready.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Vincent Burke, Utility Services. June 1st, here we are, hurricane season is upon us. This is a twofold announcement, is to talk to our residents to let them know that hurricane season is upon us. And also we are holding a hurricane, the word I'm looking for is an expo today, this Saturday, the 8th, at the Indian River County Mall. I have here a pamphlet that I'd like everybody to take a look at, and if I can just put that up on the screen.
Elmo's on. You moved it.
Oh, I gotcha.
I'm not sure if that's the right
We
one.
get the Elmo feed, but we don't get the camera feed.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Mike's checking on the feed.
One of these days I'll get to know that system by heart. I apologize for the delay.
Make you feeling better, Eric. Couldn't remember.
Okay. On the job learning.
Good training.
This is the brochure that we have at the outside of this hall that people can pick up on their way out. It contains a lot of information. I'm not going to go into great detail, but on the bottom left is a ton of information that residents can use when it does come into storm season, whether or not they look at the website. I encourage all folks to try to tie into the Indian River County Emergency Services broadcast. They do a great job of letting residents know via email systems and tracking of where the storm is in relation to the county and some of the impacts that are happening, as well as the Government Channel 27, the radio station that's listed here, the NOAA site, and also, for the record, the Emergency Management phone-in line, which is 772-567-5555. 2129. It's a great resource for folks to call in to find out what's going on. And the meat of the brochure is just a summary message to let folks know to trim their trees now to try to clear away debris from the houses. We have our convenience centers that are located throughout the county that will accept this yard waste. And also, we want to just make sure that there's any projectiles in and around the house that can be taken care of before the storm event occurs. We urge residents to maybe take some time now to stock up on some water and some other things in preparation so that they won't wait till the last minute and have a large rush if these things come down. So I just wanted to remind residents that here we are in hurricane season from June 1st through November 30th, that we are ready. And we are doing our part to be ready for the storm season that's coming upon us. And again, this Saturday, if people want more information, tracking maps, other brochures, we encourage residents to come out to the Indian River County Mall from 10 till 4 this Saturday to get some more information, to work with our friends in emergency services. And I'll leave it to Mr. King to add anything that I've left out. Thank you.
Very good. Again, for the record, my name is John King, Director of Emergency Services. And just want to just reinforce to the general public that the 6-month season, hurricane season, has just begun. It's June 1st through last day of November. People often ask, well, how many storms are you going to have this year? And usually the seasonal average is 12 named storms. 6 of them will become hurricanes, and 3 will become major hurricanes. And a major hurricane is a storm that has winds in excess of 111 miles per hour. I encourage people again and again that when they make these seasonal announcements, that NOAA comes out and gives specific information, and their indicators are this hurricane season will actually be more active than what I just gave you as a seasonal average. And there's 3 factors that kind of contribute to hurricane season, and one of them is if you have in Western Africa, if they have a strong monsoon season, there seems to be a relationship to increased hurricane activity. If you have warm seasonal waters, both in the Caribbean and the Atlantic, that's a second factor. And a third factor is whether we have a strong El Nino or not. And when we don't have a strong El Nino, that also contributes. So all 3 factors are in line to have a more active season. Now, I just mentioned there might be 12 named storms. NOAA's not suggesting that they'll have 12 landfalls. They're just saying there'll be 12 storms. And what I encourage people is I'm less concerned about how many storms we have, and I'm more concerned about how many storms visit our neighborhood. And so now is the time for people to have a family plan. It's time for them to have a pet plan. And it's a time for them to have a plan with their employer about what their expectations of their employer is. So they get their personal life in order with their family, their house, their property, their pets, and their employers, and all the county employees that work here. If we do have a severe event happen here, you'll see all the county employees coming to work. I can tell you the county administrator, assistant county administrator, and all the senior staff has had a number of discussions preparing for this hurricane season. And it's one of those kinds of things we hope we never have to use. But if we do, we know that we're going to have a good continuity of government, and we'll be in a position to try to recover this community back to normalcy as soon as possible. So thank you.
Chief, just a question. I know they were tracking a system down in the Caribbean earlier. Is that developed into anything, or is it?
That's a good question. Right now it's called 91L.
Right.
It doesn't have a name yet. And there's every indication that today we could have rainfall. As that begins to move kind of to the northeast, there's an anticipation that it's going to move probably towards the Big Bend area of Florida. And there's a cold front pushing down from the Midwest. And if it gets there, we can expect rainfalls of less than 1 inch today, perhaps about 1 inch tomorrow, and perhaps on Thursday actually having quite a wet day. So again, that's early, and that storm does look like it's going to have some impact. These storm events are low pressure events, which means they spin counterclockwise. And so if you look at that storm, you try to find where the eye is, just anticipate all that energy coming from the bottom side of that storm and pushing up across the state. And I think South Florida is actually getting some rain right as we speak. But it's a very good question. I'm keeping an eye on that one too.
There you go.
And,
starting already.
Could be a very wet season. Yeah. And wet isn't always bad, as long as it's spaced out over time. The agriculture, which is in this state, is very dependent upon that rainfall to recharge the ground. And many people in this state have shallow wells they use for water every day. And so without those rainfalls, we would really be on the other end of the spectrum with a drought. So rain's not bad, just not too much rain and too much wind all at one time.
Thank you, Chief.
Chief, thank you for reminding us to be ready. And again, folks can stop by the Indian River Mall this weekend to get more tips and facts and words to prepare for the hurricane season. But I just want to say that I think we're in good hands with the EOC that we have, a far cry from 2004 when we really just had the basics. We have a state-of-the-art EOC, and thank you for the relationships that you built over the years so that we are in good hands.
Thank you very much. I tell you, I think that the people I work with in the county are the best, and they're all working to make us ready for hurricane season. Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner
Mr. Chairman, I want to thank Chief King and Brian Burkina and the other staff out there. They gave me a nice tour of the facility as being the new kid on the block. I had not gotten the kind of red carpet or gray carpet treatment throughout the building. But what was nice is the week before I had I took my class with the CCA of Florida for FEMA preparation and understanding of how FEMA works, and then the next week having to go through the tour of the facility, and then the day after watched and kind of stood as a fly in the corner on the wall and watched the hurricane drill of the simulated storm of how well that room comes together with everybody at the table, all the agencies, all the groups, and if you didn't know it was a simulation, I mean, they make it pretty real. They have a real storm, a real event, real press briefings, it's a good drill for everybody, and everything seemed to work very well that day. So I was very impressed with all the staff and all the agencies that were out there, and now we just hope we don't have to use it. But if we do, we've got comfort knowing it's set up and ready to go.
Thank you very much for that.
Be careful what you wish for. You hang around there enough, there's talk of an Ops 1 class, and they might throw some bunker gear on you and see how prepared you are. Bring it on down. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the regular meeting of May 7, 2013, as well as the regular meeting of May 14, 2013.
Move to approve, Mr. Chairman.
That's motion by Commissioner Davis, seconded by Commissioner O'Brien. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And the consent agenda, gentlemen.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I did want to pull 8K.
8K is pulled by council.
Move to approve as amended.
Second. Motion by Commissioner Davis, seconded by myself. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously with K. Kilo being pulled by council. Councilor.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. As the agenda item notes, since 2009, the sheriff has been working with county staff and outside architect Tony Donadio with respect to a spatial needs analysis and a site master plan. One aspect of that effort has included the need for an improved and expanded evidence storage facility. In fact, this agenda item is to pay for professional design fees for that expanded evidence storage facility. The reason why I raised the question on this item is it's being funded in part by sales tax and in part by impact fees. When we fund something with impact fees, we typically include in the agenda memo a finding that growth within the county has in part created the need for this expansion, and growth will benefit from this expanded facility. That did not get placed in this agenda, so I wanted the board separately to make that finding as part of this approval.
And a motion for that will be good enough for legal sufficiency?
Yes, as long as it's reflected in the minutes.
Which one do you want first?
Well, I think you can approve the item with the finding that growth has created in part the need for this facility and growth will benefit.
So moved.
Second. Motion by Commissioner Davis, seconded by myself. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Will that suffice, council?
Yes, it will.
Thank you, sir. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing, which is proposed ordinance allowing additional homestead exemption for qualifying senior citizens pursuant to Amendment 11, memorandum dated May 22nd, 2013. It's legislative in nature, and it's found on pages 101 through 118.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. This is, as you know, a public hearing. It's for the proposed or possible adoption of a new ordinance creating an additional homestead exemption for senior citizens who meet certain qualifications. All of this comes back to Amendment 11, which was passed or approved by over 60% of the voters in the November 2012 general election. The Florida legislature implemented that constitutional amendment by revising a statute to basically provide that if a county wants to adopt this new additional senior citizen exemption, it must do so by ordinance, and the ordinance must be passed by a supermajority, which in our case means by 4 affirmative votes. Back on May 7, this board directed me to go ahead and prepare an ordinance creating this additional senior exemption in the amount of $25,000. The exemption can be up to the amount of the full assessed value of the property, but this board directed $25,000. So as directed, we have prepared that ordinance. We bring it back today for public hearing and consideration. As I mentioned in the agenda memo, we've had a little bit of difficulty trying to figure out exactly how much lost tax revenue there will be from an exemption of this type in the amount of $25,000. We've worked with the property appraiser's office, and Jason has also tried to calculate it as well. As near as we can tell, it will not be major. The best figures we received from the property appraiser was between roughly $11,600 and $23,000. We're unclear if those numbers are accurate. You never quite know because you don't know how many people are going to actually claim the exemption. But the bottom line appears to be that the loss of tax revenue will not be significant. So I, at this point, offer that ordinance to the board. A public hearing is required, and as I say, a majority of 4 is required to adopt this particular ordinance.
Gentlemen, any discussion before we open the public hearing? This is a public hearing. Now, open the public hearing and invite the public to speak. Good morning.
Good morning. My name's David Durney, and I'm, like Mr. Dietz, not used to public speaking, or not a man of words, but today I just might be. I prepared a few things, and I've researched this a little bit. First, I'll try to put a face on this ordinance for you. I put this all down so I can just read it because this is a little nerve-wracking.
Sure.
I'd like to put a face on this ordinance for you. One of the people that this exemption would assist, my grandmother, the driving force behind my passion concerning this exemption. Then I'll ask you a few questions about the exemption and provide testimony in support of its passing. My grandmother is currently 99. She's very active. In fact, she still golfed out at Dodger Pines until that was closed when she was 90. She dreads driving by there now to see it all grown up. She's a pistol. She's very sharp, independent, and very healthy. She was born in 1914. Wow. She was 16 when the Great Depression kicked in, which was a very hard time to begin your career and survive. Thus, like many of that generation, my grandparents were very responsible and frugal with money. They were hardworking, honorable, conscious, dedicated to their family, their community, their church, and their employer. Both my parents and my grandparents worked very hard at a steel company in Western New York until their retirement. Shortly after my grandparents retired, in 1986, they moved to Vero Beach for the healthy weather and to escape the extremely high taxes of New York, thinking they could financially live stress-free comfortably the rest of their lives. In my grandfather's case, that happened until he died in 1998. However, that turned around in 2001 for my grandmother when the steel company went bankrupt due to its inability to compete with foreign cheap labor, mainly from China, that the U.S. government was woefully ineffective in controlling. When that happened, her pension was reduced by 90%. She lost her health care, which since has cost her $240 a month to maintain. She lost her life insurance, and she lost her long-term care insurance, which she expected to cover her stay in an assisted living community when necessary. With the continuous large cost of living increases, things have become very tight. When Social Security increases, Medicare usually always increases, and the net gain is negligible. Her property insurance has doubled. Her HOA fees always rise, medical costs rise, gas rises, food rises, utilities rises, etc., and everything continues to rise except your fixed income. Then in 2008, due to the decrease in the property values in Florida, her home decreased in value about 50%. At that point, she was no longer eligible for the additional homestead exemption, decrease caused by basically the dishonest banks that caused the worst recession since the Great Depression, and woefully, again, uncontrolled by the U.S. government. Then in 2010, she was required to cash in her personal life insurance policy, not her one from her employer, her personal one, due to some law because the policy was 75 years old. She was 21 when she took out that policy. What 21-year-old these days is responsible enough to get a life insurance policy? I mean, they're generally they're more concerned about the latest smartphone technology and having fun. I am, however, encouraged and excited to see that the school curriculum will now require teaching high school students a class on personal finance. Anyway, since she had to cash in her life insurance, she was no longer eligible for Medicare's prescription drug assistance program due to her asset valuation. She now has fears that she will need to go into a nursing home. There will quickly be no money left to pay for her funeral and burial, with nursing home costs running around $80,000 a year. She's honorable and does not believe in hiding her assets or gifting money to a family as means of evading paying for end of life, and will qualify for assistance. Thus, in 2010, after my father passed away, I moved here to care for my mother and my grandmother to try to keep them from losing their homes, ending up on Medicaid, and living out their final years in a less than optimal state-run nursing home. It's very difficult to watch her deal with financial stress, which she never realized she would become a low-income member of the society. I'm constantly looking for ways for her to economize. It's one thing to see her go shopping and look for a deal to save money, but it's another to when it takes on a whole new different meaning when you're trying to survive, afford, and feed yourself and not lose your home. My grandmother's property taxes are currently about 5% of her income, and her insurance costs are approximately 25% of her income. At this time, I'd like to give you, if I may, a list of questions that I have, and a report.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. How these exemptions are being offered in the state
Thank you.
board. Maybe you want to use the second page first. It shows that this amendment immediately was instituted by 10 counties in Florida. And 4 additional counties have done it so far this year. I'm sure the rest of the counties are weighing it as this council is. It also shows the level at which 56 counties are offering this low-income senior exemption. Generally, the exemption is offered for $25,000 or $50,000. Currently, 32 counties offer this exemption at the $50,000 level, and the remaining 26 counties generally offer it at $25,000. Which brings me, I found this information by looking on all the 56 or 58 property appraisers' websites, and I also emailed all of them and have received a considerable response to know the number of ones that have the exemption, the full exemption for 2013.
And sir, just to make sure, just to clarify, I think what you were just talking about is the 2001 additional exemption. $25,000.
That's the $25,000, $50,000 one, yes.
Right, and it started at $25,000, and at some point the legislature authorized counties to increase it up to $50,000.
I'm not sure of that, but possibly, yes.
Yeah, and that's your list on the right side of these columns.
Correct. That's the
25 of the 50.
current status of what people are offering.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess I'll start out with my questions. The first one, I sort of answered it in that the granny fat thing is it's not a question. So actually, but at that point, I could state that at this point, since you're rewriting the ordinance that would become the code, that you would have at this opportunity also to increase your regular low-income senior exemption up to $50,000. That basically would save each low individual, by my calculation, each low-income senior about $40 a year. So if you up it from $20 to $50,000, that's what would happen. My second question, you had the opportunity of granting each or both of these additional exemptions. This again, is the opportunity for you to increase the senior exemption to $50,000. The Constitution read, and bear with me, this was a real learning experience for me, and I can see how it's difficult to understand the meaning of the law. It's so many different places. It's changed so much in the last year. The Constitution reads not exceeding $50,000. The statute reads that you would have to set it at $50,000. The final bill reads up to $50,000. That was just changed last week before the governor signed it. Before that, it would have had to have been $50,000. He added the word up to, so it can be negotiable. It's wild that something like that can be changed after it's been voted on by the general public. And I think it might be a good idea to invite the governor to go for a swim in the lagoon here. That's another issue I won't go into. So I guess that's up to you guys if you want to take this opportunity to up that to $50,000. The third question has to do with why the ordinance was modified from the Constitution to statute to say $25,000 instead of equal to the assessed value of the property. I've done some research, and it appears to me that that is not the possible way that it can be done. The Constitution reads an exemption equal to the assessed value of the property. The statute reads the amount of the assessed value of the property. And the Senate bill that the governor signed reads the amount of the assessed value of the property. So with all due respect, I believe that can't be replaced with the value of $25,000.
We did, just to answer that question, the language is in terms of we may adopt an ordinance of that type. And I know we have interpreted it to mean the assessed value or any amount up to that if we choose to do so. And I know some other counties have adopted it, have interpreted it the same way. So the answer to your question is basically deriving out of that word may, we have interpreted it to allow anything up to that full assessed value.
I believe that you may institute either the $25,000 or $50,000 low-income senior exemption and or both, including the second one, which is the one that gives the person, should give the person full exemption of the value of their property up to $250,000 if they've lived in their home for 25 years. I mean, I don't find anywhere that it ever said in that portion, the 196.1 075-2B, that it ever said up to the value of the assessment of the home. I did receive a reply from the Florida Department of Revenue, the Property Tax Oversight Department, Mr. James McAdams, that indeed the section 196-075-2B should say the amount of the assessed value of the property. So I would request that you make sure that's right before you.
And if you share a copy of that letter with me, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, whatever, that would be fine. It certainly gets confusing. Secondly, probably on a less important, that's probably my most important point here. Is that. Next is my question on how was the ordinance modified from the Constitution, the Senate bill, to has maintained his or her residence on the property for at least 25 years, instead of the way it should read is has maintained thereon the permanent residence of the owner for at least 25 years. The connotation of how that is changed, I'm not sure how will come up in when people try to fight for this or not. But I think that might possibly is wrong as well. Next, I'm curious about, there was two other amendments that were voted in by in the general election. The first one was a rewording of the Veterans Disability to Combat Injury Amendment for a homestead property tax discount. And in that, basically, they removed the requirement that a veteran had to enter the service from the state of Florida. Is that something that just takes effect? It doesn't need to be discussed by this commission, and the property appraiser just implements that?
I can't tell you, excuse me, off the top of my head. We haven't headed down that path. Most of these property tax exemptions actually do get created at the state level. It's a little bit unusual that the county has an option to adopt it or not. In this case, the senior exemption, we do have some options. There are currently something like, I believe, 10 or 11 different exemptions or reductions in assessed value that exist right now in Indian River County, but only 2 of those were created by county ordinance. The other 8 or 9 were all created at the state level. And I believe the one you're talking about is one that's dealt with at the state level.
Okay. And that's probably the same thing for the number 9 homestead property exemption. A surviving spouse, military veteran, or first responder killed in action.
Now, that's also a state-created exemption that we don't have control over, I don't believe.
Okay. Next, I just wanted to sort of give everyone here just a little brief overview of how this low-income senior amendment came to today. In 2001, a bill was submitted to the House of Representatives. It goes through a bunch of committees, finance and tax, economic community. A lot of work is done on it. It's read 3 times at a House session, and the House of Representatives approved this 116-0 unanimously. It then goes to the Senate and goes through a bunch of committees and things like that, and it was approved by the state Senate unanimously, 40-0. It then gets put on the ballot for the general election last November. In the state, 7,720,000 people voted yes for this vote, and as you said, that's about 1.26%. Thankfully, just 1% more than it needed to be accepted. And in Indian River County, 64,000 residents voted, and 35,000, or 54%, voted yes. I didn't have the time to review your platforms and promises for when you guys ran for your seats on the commission, but I have an idea that in one form or another you said that you would work to implement what you believe voters wanted. And what a better way of knowing what the voters want than to have an amendment in the general election. I have a feeling that you commissioners became commissioners to help serve your community and represent them, and that you certainly didn't do it for the money. You could obviously be making considerably more in the private sector. Although I'm not sure that stands pertaining to Mr. Baird. That was supposed to be funny.
Well, he's not here, so I guess...
Oh, he's not here?
No.
I'm sorry.
Mr.
Okay.
Baird is on official county business today, and Mr. Zito, our deputy county administrator, is here present, though, but maybe that's perhaps why you did not see as much laughter as you normally would have.
Okay.
People confuse us all the time.
Yeah, they look so much alike.
I thought you guys had switched chairs and the signs were wrong.
See, you got to laugh after all.
Okay, good. So at that point, the amendment was implemented by general law, and again, after we voted, it was changed a few times by the legislature. Just as a side fact, of the 11 constitutional amendments that were on the ballot in November, the 3 that were, of the 11 that were voted on, Indian River County matched the results of the election. Indian River County voted no for everything except number 2, number 9, and number 11. So it's sort of surprising to me that when you see those amendments, you wonder whether people are really learning about them and voting, or they're just voting all yes or all no. It just appears to me that people really take an interest and they learned about them and they voted for what they thought was right. At that point, after the election ran, I sort of watched for this amendment to see what would happen with it. And after 5 months, I didn't see anything brought up with the commission agenda. So I sent an email out, and Mr. Davis replied to me that he would bring it up in the meeting, and he got some information from the town attorney, and brought it up before the board, and you guys you voted on it. And he didn't wait for the attorney said it would be in April or May, and you brought it up right away and got on the agenda. Thank you. At that point, when it was brought up in the agenda, there's actually, so people know, three of these commissioners at that point were for the exemption, and 2 were against it. Commissioner O'Brien and Commissioner Solari did not support the exemption. They didn't favor one group over another. In my opinion, almost every decision you make as a commissioner favors one group over another. Your positions give you immense power, and we trust that you weigh heavily the repercussions of each decision. I could give examples of how each decision doesn't impact the general community, but I don't want to go into that type of a thing. But at that point, I could. Honestly, I'm concerned that not all the commissioners were fully aware or understood the amendment when they voted, nor did they take the time to learn who this would benefit. At some point, you were possibly incorrectly told that the income level was $20,000 when it's more, but I'm sure you understand that now. At that point, it possibly appears you were unaware that the supermajority was required to pass it, because if you voted 3-2, it should have just been dead in the water. But that might not be the political process, I'm not sure. From one comment, Commissioner Flesher may have believed that this included an exemption for school taxes as well. but this doesn't include the school taxes, but that's possibly not what your comment meant.
It's not what I meant. That's right.
Okay. I think maybe you meant that the people that lived here and worked and paid their school taxes for 25 years maybe deserved a little bit of a break on their...
A little bit of a break, and perhaps this would offset what they detest about paying school taxes when they obviously do not have students within the system.
Okay.
And it's often brought up by senior citizens.
Okay.
As it should be.
Thank you for clarifying that. And to put Commissioner O'Brien on the hot seat, you said the residency seemed arbitrary and would be the camel's nose under the tent and open doors for special entitlement groups. This is the way it reads: who has maintained thereon the permanent residence of the owner for not less than 25 years. I really don't understand what seems so arbitrary about that part of the ordinance.
I think it's very clear that when we already have 11 exemptions that apply to property taxes, this will be a 12th. And next year, it might be someone that says, well, you know, I've been here 20 years, and they have a good story. And then so there'll be another constitutional amendment for a 20-year residency, and then 15. And then the next group will be, you know, hey, why 65? Why not 62? And my point is, well, several things. Is one, I don't believe messing with our state constitution is a proper way to adjust our budget. I do believe this does open the door for the next group that has a great story. And it's not that I'm against older people or veterans or widows of first responders. But I think this particular board, we have worked very hard over the last few years to reduce our budget and to deliver the highest level of services at the lowest possible cost to the taxpayer. And I believe that's the proper way to adjust our tax revenue, is by providing those services the community needs. And if we can, some of the services the community wants, and do it at the lowest cost we possibly can. And I believe that's how we should be doing our budget.
Okay. Okay. I agree with your points. I do. I just am sort of sorry that it took this recession to get to that point, to force you to do that. And maybe at this point, now that the property values are starting to rise and the economy seems to be coming back, that's what they say this week, that maybe you can adjust and not just spend as much as you take in, and maybe start saving for the future a little bit. The property appraiser estimated the revenue loss between $16,000 and $23,000. I really wouldn't expect that money would actually leave the county. It's going to still stay in the county's economy. There's a spreadsheet from the appraiser office per an email from Mr. Davis in February listing the residents that fall under the guidelines for this low-income senior exemption for people that have been in their homes for 25 years. And I think it would be useful to look at that. And does anyone recall the actual number of residents that this would assist?
I don't think we know.
Okay.
And not only that, if their income is what it is today versus what it would be whenever in the event this passes, clearly that could change if their incomes change too. So it's I really see it being more as a moving target every year as far as the number of individuals that would or would not qualify for this.
Right. If their income goes up, sure.
Then that's just my thoughts. I don't know that to be. I mean,
yeah. The sliding scale for income is automatically recalculated on some certain set.
Exactly. Or they could have won on a scratch-off ticket or something like that, and it changed for that year. So
you're already using that formula to see whether they are qualified for the first $25,000 senior discount. Okay. Well, it's the third. It's actually the third one, but Okay. Okay, so I think for this one, we're actually not talking about a large number of residents for the additional people that have lived in their home for 25 years.
That's
So-
what we're being advised by staff at this point. I trust that each of us had made inquiry as to that number, and it is considered moderate at best.
Unfortunately, the primary staff person who can answer your question is our finance person who is with Mr. Baird out of state on county business right now.
Okay.
He's the one who worked primarily with the property appraiser's office to try to determine how many people were eligible and what the lost tax revenue would be.
Okay.
His name is Jason Brown.
Okay. So in conclusion, believe it or not, I just I don't totally agree with the stipulation of the exemption, but I believe it has enough merit to be adopted. That's how things sort of start and then are hopefully modified to fully represent the true intent. It would seem to make more sense to be for this to be implemented to be for homeowners 65 and over that have owned homes and lived in Indian River County for 25 years or more. Whether it be owning one single residence or moving between different residences, not just the same residence for 25 years, why should someone be excluded just because they've moved once in the same county? Secondly, there could be a means check on the qualification for this exemption, but I realize that that's rarely utilized and creates a lot of controversy. But at some point, I believe that's going to become the norm. However, at this time, no exemptions require any qualification for a means check, as well as much as I know. A means check brings up a whole bailiwick of probably would bring up a lot more things for new exemptions and things like that. A person can hide their assets, put it offshore, whatever, cash, whatever, give it to family, to be able to qualify for an exemption. If you look at this exemption, for example, if someone moves here after retirement, say 65, this exemption sort of doesn't kick in until they're 90. So this really isn't for people that have moved here to retire. This exemption is sort of more for primary residents that began, say, you'd have to be 40 when you were in this residence to get this exemption when you turn 65. So you've worked in this county, you've paid your taxes, your children have gone to school here. Therefore, I would sincerely request that you give further detailed review to this ordinance and give it the time and attention it deserves. Upping the lower senior income exemption of $50,000 and passing the 25-year resident amendment. Do you have any questions for me?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Mr. O'Brien.
First, I would like to thank you and commend you for coming forward. It is always a little nervous your first time there, and I think you did a great job, and you're very good getting your points across. And so I just want to commend you for coming forward, which kind of leads me to my first point. When we voted 3-2, it does require a supermajority, and we realized that at the time. But I believe the entire board kind of felt that, even knowing that, we still wanted to bring it forward to a public hearing, which would allow people just like yourself the opportunity to come and speak on it. So that's kind of why we brought it forward, even with the 3-2 vote, was just to give the public a chance to speak on the issue. When you talked about how we got here and how the legislature voted, both the House and the Senate voting unanimously, that wasn't their budget they were voting on, it was ours. And, I think we could have a vote here, 5-0, saying that the House of Representatives should be paying $1,000 a month for their health care, and we would pass it, but, that's not our money we're dealing with. So, it's easy for them to vote, yeah, let's tell the county what to do with their budget, so that's an easy vote for them. And the same with the public. If I went to my kids and said, okay, we're going to have a vote, and do you want ice cream for dinner or broccoli? they're going to vote for ice cream. And if you go to the public and say, would you like to pay taxes or would you like to pay no taxes, they're going to vote no taxes. It's just kind of a thing. Everybody's going to vote for what they want. And sometimes, I believe, we have to sit here and be the good parent, which sometimes is telling them no. I know you want ice cream for dinner, but no, you're not getting ice cream. You're going to have to eat the broccoli. So
why compare your voters to children? They're not children.
It's any vote. You give people two choices, and they're always going to take the easiest one. And like I said, if you give them a choice between taxes or no taxes, they're going to vote for no taxes. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's the right thing to do.
Well, I'm sure some of the other exemptions or the amendments that pertain to taxes possibly, and they voted no on those. I'll agree to disagree with you on that.
And I appreciate you coming forward, and we probably will disagree on this one.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Anything further, Commissioner Bryan? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Counselor.
just to follow up on a point we discussed earlier, the gentleman caught me a little bit off guard on the up to language because, keeping in mind I drafted this originally about 7 weeks ago.
Right.
And as I quickly tried to respond, I didn't really remember what the authority was to go down to below the full assessed value. But what they did is they took the up to language out of Section 2, as you noted, of the statute. But what they did is they put that concept into Section 4, which deals with the ordinance that the board can adopt to allow this exemption. And Section 4C of that same statute you're talking about this ordinance, says that the ordinance must specify the amount of the exemption, which may not exceed the applicable amount specified in Section 2. So that's what they're saying with respect to the ordinance. So it is clear that we do have the authority to adopt an ordinance in a lesser amount. And I'm sorry that I didn't recall that instantly when you raised it earlier, but
that's not a problem.
Looking at the statute, I recall it now.
These statutes and things are quite difficult to discern, so I will look at that. And
Section 4C.
4C, great. All right. So how did you arrive at the figure of taking the figure that could possibly be $250,000 and bringing it down to $25,000? Was that a consensus of these individuals here on the commission, or? What
we do with an ordinance is typically we prepare it and bring it to the board for initial consideration. And when we brought this ordinance for initial consideration, which was roughly 1 month ago, that amount was left blank, and it was left to the board to choose up to the full assessed value or some lesser amount. And when they had that 3-2 vote, they voted an amount of $25,000.
Okay. That was May 7th?
Yes, it was.
7th.
Was it?
Yes.
Yeah, I haven't been.
Okay.
I tried twice to download this and look at that, and it failed both times. It's like 500 megabytes of video. And the minutes for that meeting aren't up on the website yet, so I wasn't sure how that happened.
I have them here for you.
Mr. Chairman?
Which we just approved, the May 7th meeting.
I wanted to say thank you for a very detailed presentation today, and that one correspondence that you received from the Department of Revenue, if you have an extra copy of that to give to the county attorney, that can be placed as part of the record. But a very detailed, if that's your first time at the podium, did a great job today.
Engineer and businessman, not a politician.
Okay, thank
I'm
you.
also giving you the Santa Clara, the copy of the Santa Clara letter.
You need, sir, I need you to speak into the microphone so the rest of the public can hear you.
I gave the town attorney a copy of the email from the state budget department, and a copy of the Clara how is it, Clara?
Santa Clara?
Santa Clara County.
Santa Rosa. That's what it
Santa
says.
Rosa
Yeah.
County copy of the ordinance that they just passed. And they passed an ordinance, the first senior low income exemption of $50,000, and the second senior low income, lived in your house 25 years, the full assessment exemption on their taxes.
Thank you.
Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak regarding this change? Seeing none, public hearing is now closed.
Mr. Chairman?
Gentlemen.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I really do appreciate the presentation, and I respect Commissioner O'Brien, and I think I know where Commissioner Solari is going to be on this, just like it was in the past. I don't mean to put words or positions in anybody's mind or mouth. But in this instance, I'm looking here at the clerk's website, and there's tax deed sales coming up June 18th. And in there, you can look down through there, and you see Vista Royale, you see Villas at Indian River. These are all 55-plus communities. I believe there's 3 in Vista Royale. These are, the tax deeds that are happening. And I don't know that they would meet the criteria of this ordinance or not. But, these very well could be seniors that are losing their homes based on something that we could have done something about. I agree with you about a group here. It's just that when you take this that's in front of me right now for a June 18th tax deed sale that's going to happen at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday at the clerk's, at the jury assembly room, that should hit home. And in addition to that, I've never been one to do government by applause meter. I'm not. But this isn't an applause meter. To me, this is the right thing to do in this instance. And I'm not basing my decision on this just because 64% of Indian River County's residents approved this in the general election. I just feel this is the right thing to do. So therefore, I'll go ahead and I'll move approval.
Second.
Commissioner, I think there's 4,000 or 5,000 tax deeds going up for sale.
No, Commissioner, this is different than a tax certificate.
Okay.
This is an actual tax deed.
Okay.
This is 3 years, or going on the third year of a tax certificate. Okay. This is where somebody will get title to the property.
Right. Okay. I would still guess that there's probably some of those tax deeds that was a home from a younger working family. And they couldn't pay their taxes either.
There are, but these are, again, 55-plus communities. Vista Royale.
Right, but
Vista Gardens.
My point is, there are other folks out there that don't meet the 65 qualification that are losing their home, and do we exempt everybody's taxes to cover that? And
the answer to that would be no. I mean, that's why I understand what you're saying, but just in looking at this in these 55-plus communities, just like they brought out with his 99-year-old mom. I mean,
grandmother.
Grandmother, excuse me. Thank you. But
yeah,
I'll stick with my mother.
And I second it. I will say that we heard an inference about ice cream and broccoli. I'm going to give you an inference about dog food and rice cakes. And this ordinance doesn't really change anyone's economic wealth where they're going to have a social status change. But folks, we're talking about individuals that probably are within the grouping of the greatest generation. Individuals who do know sacrifice and unfortunately are sacrificing on a near daily basis. In my former occupation, I had the opportunity to be in many homes, or what folks called homes, where they were, and I had some observances, and I just want to share them with you. It's regarding what they eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Sometimes it's the same. It's just been heated up. Sometimes it's rice cakes and peanut butter, and sometimes just rice cake, depending on if peanut butter was on the 2-for-1 special. And these are facts. And I know that this ordinance doesn't change it, but we at least deserve, or the individuals deserve, the opportunity for us to think for them and about them And yes, I agree, there is a slippery slope with many ordinances that we have to be cautious of, but, you know, I don't think that this is that slippery slope situation, and I don't think people are going to be coming out of the woodwork saying, well, what about me and what about me? I think it's about individuals who are making harsher decisions than we all realize. You know, and I mentioned dog food. When an individual is in their home and opening up the same can for their companion, their four-legged companion, as they are for their dinner, that's serious. And maybe they don't have the opportunity, maybe as you pointed out, at 21 years of age, you're not deciding whether to plan for the future, to plan for that golden opportunity, that golden age. But in this case, there are folks that couldn't do that they couldn't due to other circumstances. And I think if the legislature allows for it, it's clearly supportable by this commission looking at the individuals that may benefit, a very small benefit. We're hearing from staff that it's going to mean maybe $100. That could be the difference between daily sustenance and a little better quality daily sustenance. And I think that we owe that to our senior community. Thank you.
Nothing further?
Yeah, on this one, I'm following with Commissioner O'Brien. I believe that this Constitution is no place to put something like this. I also believe that we've gotten a number of exemptions for people who perhaps should have exemptions, and they're being taken advantage of properly right now, and there's no reason to add another one. I believe that all additional exemptions just further distort an ad valorem tax system, which basically works well, but it's going to work less well as we continue to distort it. I do think that we ought to note that if we reduce the burden on one group, we're going to increase it on others, and that there are families, young families with children, who struggle as much as old people living alone, and I don't want to add to their burden. I also would like to note that this county has done a very good job providing a lot of opportunities for everybody in this community by having beaches and parks, recreational opportunities that are available to everybody at no cost, and I want that to continue. So I don't want to further distort the ad valorem tax system, which might then force us to charge for these type of opportunities, which other communities often do. I believe at the end of the day that what this commission has done in the last 4 or 5 years to keep ad valorem taxes as low as possible for everybody in this community is the right thing, and I believe that the best thing for the community as a whole would be if we kept our focus on that, and in the next budget cycle and the budget cycles after that kept the focus clearly on having the lowest millage rate possible, so that we could keep the ad valorem taxes as low as possible for everybody would be the proper thing for the community as a whole. So I'll be voting against this.
Any further discussion? Well, folks, we need a supermajority. We have a motion by Commissioner Davis, seconded by myself, and appearing from the discussion. Let's see how that goes. I just find it hard to believe that we can look at the insulation of people's homes and give them an incentive. We could look at different things we can do for our environment, for our homes, and we're not concerned about the senior individuals that are truly the crux of our society. I think the seniors do need this little break, and it's unfortunate that we have to look at other objectives like job incentives and insulation and windows and other matters, but not where it counts. Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Motion fails with Commissioner O'Brien and Commissioner Solari objecting.
Due to the fact the supermajority was necessary.
Yes. Supermajority was necessary, and as council advised, we needed a 4-to-1 vote. Thank you, and thank you for your public input as well. Next item on the agenda is public notice items. Council?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have 2 public notice items. The first is notice of a scheduled public hearing on June 18, 2013, relating to a consideration of amendments of land development regulations, chapters 901, 911, and 912, to change the limitations for the size of commercial vehicles and recreational vehicles parked outside in residential areas. There is a memorandum in the book dated May 20, 2013. That's a legislative matter. And the second is a notice of a scheduled public hearing on July 2, 2013. And that's for consideration of amendments to Land Development Regulations, Chapter 915, Plan Development, to change mixed-use development regulations consistent with the Comprehensive Plan mixed-use policy, and to delete an out-of-date table in Chapter 942, Traffic. There's also in the book a memorandum dated May 20, 2013, and that's also a legislative matter.
Thank you, Councilor. The next item on the agenda is departmental matters, utility services, regarding item J1, which is the lift station supervisory control and data acquisition, SCADA, systems upgrade, memorandum dated May 29, 2013, found on pages 120 through 124. Good morning, Mr. Burke.
Good morning. Thank you, Commissioner. For the record, Vincent Burke, Utility Services. Staff has requested board approval for 48 units that are associated throughout the county to talk to a central control station. It's an upgrade of the RTUs that are over 20 years old. And this is a conglomerate of new processors, boards, telemetry control unit, fiberglass enclosure, surge protection, and battery backup at each of our stations. We have over 300 plus lift stations throughout the county, and these are tied into a central monitoring station that can tell us if we have high levels, power failures, or other problems, and then it sends a signal to a centrally monitored station where we can get staff out there to quickly do corrective action so that we don't have any backup problems. So the cost of this is just over $300,000. We're trying to use a company called Data Flow Systems to build on what we've already started going back to 1990, where we've had a lot of units put onto this remote telemetry unit. So it comes with some radio licensing that we use DFS to interact with the FCC, Federal Communications Company. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer it, but staff is recommending that the board approves this and we can move forward with data flow control systems, and I can answer any questions if there are any.
Gentlemen?
One somewhat related to lift stations, but maybe not part of this agreement. Under all the lift stations, do all the non-generator lift stations have the remote generator plug port on the side of their power boxes now?
Utilities has a standard so that we do have a generator receptacle, and there's an interlock switch so that you can't backfeed the utility power, so that we can operate off of mobile generators that we can bring to the site to plug into that unit and feed it off of the generator. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
In addition to that, and I don't know whether this may be just another layer, many of these generators now are starting to be placed or are starting to be accommodated with natural gas beside them, and just based on the sheer cost as well as the maintenance, I believe that the natural gas, the CNG, is probably more reliable, perhaps. I don't know whether anybody's looking into that, but if I'd like for us to start looking to see which one of those is going to be the wave of the future. Are we going to continue with the traditional diesel model, or is the compressed natural gas the way to go with our generators next to these facilities that we're fixing to monitor?
Yeah, we can take a look at where the natural gas is located at, as well as the applicability of making sure that we have positive flow to the unit to make sure that there's enough fuel, but we can certainly look into that and come back with a finding.
If I have the board support on that, I don't want to, if it's just me, don't worry about it, but if there's consensus from the board.
Sure,
we'll do some research.
We'll take a look at it.
Absolutely.
Move staff recommendation.
Second. So motion by Commissioner Davis, seconded by Commissioner Solari. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, at this time we have the next item is an attorney-client session, which must begin at 10:30, and all the other items appear to be some discussion-provoking items. So at this point, we'll take a brief recess until 10:29. We'll be reconvening and initiate the attorney-client session. The meeting will now be called back to order. Counselor, as we begin the next item, I have to, as far as Florida State Statute 286.011 sub 8, I must read something into record. However, it also includes County Administrator Joe Baird. Can you clarify that?
Yes, Florida Sunshine Law creates an exception for attorney-client sessions, and the statute says that the board may meet with the entity's attorney and the entity's chief administrative or executive officer. We traditionally put in the notice that the attorney that you'll meet with and the Joe Baird is the county administrator. It turns out that Joe Baird is out of state on county business, can't be here today. So that does not create a problem. We just need to note that while the notice originally said he would be here, in fact, he's unable to be here today.
So I'll preclude him from the notice.
Correct.
Thank you, Counselor. At this time, this is the commencement of the attorney-client session. The estimated time of the closed attorney-client session is 45 minutes. Present at the meeting will be Commissioners Wesley S. Davis, Tim Zork, Peter D. O'Brien, Bob Solari, and me, Joseph E. Flesher. Also present will be the Deputy County Attorney, William K. DeBrawl. County Administrator Joe Baird will not be present, and a certified court reporter. At the conclusion of the closed attorney-client session, this public meeting will be reopened. public meeting is hereby reopened and the attorney-client session is now terminated. Gentlemen?
Mr. Chairman, based upon our discussion with Mr. DeBrawl, I would move that we reject the settlement offer with Mr. Mensing and to cease any further negotiations.
Second. Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to note that there was actually not any full settlement offer, that they, as I understood from Mr. DeBrawl, he had proposed a settlement offer, and then after those terms were disclosed to Mr. Mensing then added new terms. Is that correct, Mr. DeBrawl?
That's correct.
Yeah, so there was not actually any settlement to actually agree on today. There were a rough scope of a settlement, but that the terms seem to be continually changing, and that's I think a good reason for just concluding all negotiations.
Thank you. Motion by Commissioner O'Brien and seconded by Commissioner Solari. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Motion carries 3-2 with Commissioner Fletcher and Commissioner Davis dissenting. Counselor?
I believe it would be the St. Francis matter.
Yes.
St. Francis matter.
Oh, no, I thought you had...
No, I have nothing else to add, sir.
The next item on the agenda is the request for a lease amendment with St. Francis Manor, memorandum dated May 28, 2013, found on pages 127 through 146.
Commissioners, back in January, the board decided that it would be able to surplus the old jail site on 17th Street. And at that time, St. Francis Manor and the Boys and Girls Club of Indian River County came and approached the board about adding additional properties to their respective leases. The first lease for consideration, the board approved that idea and directed staff to come back with lease amendments for consideration by the board. The first lease for you to consider is an amendment, the 8th Amendment to the St. Francis Manor lease. St. Francis Manor has a 5.5-acre complex of apartments designated for resident retirees that are on a lower fixed income. They would seek to add another 1.2 acres of property to their lease, and if you take a look at the screen, you can see the shaded parcel. That is the parcel that would go to St. Francis Manor for future expansion. The only thing that would not be included with the lease on the property, you can see in the left-hand side, about in the center, is a cell tower, emergency tower that's located there. It is supported by guy wires that is specifically excluded from the lease that would be retained by the county, and the easements relating thereto would also not become a part of the lease. So staff's recommendation is for the board to go ahead and approve the 8th lease amendment and authorize the chairman to execute both the lease amendment and also the corresponding resolution.
Gentlemen?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move staff recommendation to approve the 8th Amendment and modify the lease and authorize you to execute the amendment and the resolution.
Second.
Well, that was a simultaneous one. We'll yield to you, Commissioner Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
It's a motion by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by Commissioner Davis. Any further discussion?
Just for discussion, I'll be voting against it because I don't think it's appropriate for us to give taxpayer land to nonprofits to basically simply land bank for a period of time.
Okay.
Just want to make sure, Mr. DeBrawl, we will be retaining ownership of this, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
I'm ready for the question.
Ready?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 4-1 with Commissioner Solari dissenting.
He's just about a negative guy today, isn't he?
Well, that happens. The next item on the agenda is the approval for the first lease amendment for the modification for Boys and Girls Club of Indian River County Incorporated, memorandum dated May 22, 2013, found on pages 147 through 158. Counselor.
Good morning, Commissioners. Back in 2008, the county executed a lease agreement with the Boys and Girls Club of Indian River County. That was a 50-year lease agreement for building a recreation and educational facility to be run by the Boys and Girls Club. They have done that for the last 4 years at that location. They have also asked for a 2.2-acre parcel of property from the old jail site that the Commission has previously determined to be surplus. The Boys and Girls Club has volunteered to demolish the building that's on the location. They propose to go ahead and submit plans for a recreational facility green area, basically a playground play area for the participants in their program to be able to use this property for that purpose. There is a lease modification that's included in the backup material that staff is recommending approval of. Also, because the demolition of the building on the property will be in excess of $2,500, someone will have to sign the notice of commencement on behalf of the county, a notice to owner on behalf of the county. So we're asking that the board delegate that authority to the county attorney's office so that we would be able to sign off on the permits once they come through. So staff's recommendation is to go ahead and approve the addition of the 2.2 acres to the Boys and Girls Club lease for construction of the recreational facility and demolition of the existing building on the property. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the first lease amendment and modification, authorize you to execute the amendment in the resolution, and to authorize the county attorney's office to sign any notice of commencement required for the demolition.
So second. We have a motion on the floor by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by myself. Any further discussion, gentlemen? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 4-1 with Commissioner Solari dissenting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the proposed third amendment to facility lease agreement for Vero Beach Sports Village, memorandum dated May 28, 2013, found on pages 159 through 166. Counselor.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. As you all know, the county owns the former Dodgertown facilities. In 2009, the county leased those facilities to minor league baseball, which in turn, with the consent of the county, assigned that lease to Verotown LLC in 2012. The initial term of the lease is 5 years, which expires May 1, or actually April 30th, 2014. So at the moment, we are in the early part of the 5th and final year of the initial term of the lease. There are 2 5-year renewal options, and Verotown has approached the county and said that it is willing to renew the lease for that first 5-year renewal term, subject to certain changes in the lease. Those changes are outlined in your agenda memo, and I'll briefly go down through them. One of the changes is the county has agreed to pay up to $600,000 to renovate the 67 of the total 89 hotel rooms at the facility which have not yet been renovated. That requirement applies immediately. All of the other changes that are being made do not apply until May 1st, 2014. So in other words, the start of the renewal term. A second change is that the county will pay $250,000 into the capital reserve account each year during the renewal term. Presently, the lease provides for each party to provide $50,000, but that's being eliminated and replaced with the $250,000 requirement. And the notion of that is that this money will be used to repair, replace, create improvements, etc., at the facility, which is used by the county, which is owned by the county, which is the rationale behind the provision. There were also some other clarifications that were put into the amendment document dealing with equipment to be funded out of that capital account as well. Verotown was given the right to terminate the lease without liability upon 120 days' notice. All references to liquidated damages were eliminated. Now, that's kind of a double-edged sword, because once you eliminate the liquidated damages, it doesn't relieve the party of liability. It just means that they're liable for actual damages. So we made it very clear to Verotown that if by chance they leave without giving the 120 days notice, while they would not be liable for liquidated damages, they would be liable for actual damages. Some adjustments have been made in the insurance. The notable one is that the county will absorb the cost of the property and casualty insurance on the facility. That change follows the notion that it is property owned by the county and the county should insure its own property. Another change is that Vero Town has agreed that any net income that they make during the renewal term will be either reinvested back into the facility or will be turned over to the county at the end of the renewal term. That's very significant because basically it places Vero Town in the situation that they are trying to use that facility for important community purposes, and they are not trying to make money. If they make money, it will be plowed back into the facility, which is owned by the county, or, as I say, it will be turned over to the county at the end of the lease. Additionally, the Vero Town is hoping to develop a Dodgers museum on the facility, which will be open to the public. I know they're moving constructively forward on that plan right now. They've agreed to continue to have as many entertainment opportunities open to the public as they can. Lastly, we currently have, lingering from the original lease with Minor League Baseball, a personal guarantee from Minor League Baseball's parent organization, which is the National Association of Professional Baseball Leagues, Inc. That guarantee actually is very limited in that it only applies to liens on assets at the facility, since we've eliminated liquidated damages. In any event, going forward, starting May 1, 2014, that guarantee will disappear and there will not be a replacement guarantee. So we will be looking at Vero Town LLC for responsibility. I don't know if I mentioned earlier, but the general or the managing partner of Vero Town is Peter O'Malley of the Dodger family. And much of the impetus behind this from Vero Town's standpoint is his desire to preserve the Dodger heritage here in Vero Beach. And that's, he has indicated to us, is his primary motivation in moving forward, which is also why he's willing to plow any net profits back into the facility. So at this point, what you have in front of you is a third amendment to the lease agreement. It renews the lease for an additional 5 years starting May 1, 2014, and it makes the changes that I previously discussed. And it's before you for approval today.
Thank you, Counsel. Any discussion, gentlemen?
No.
I'll go ahead and move approval of the Third Amendment to the facility lease agreement.
Second.
Okay. There's some things that aren't in there, but I don't think I'll muddy the water, but mainly, because they're so hypothetical. And one of them is, let's suppose that we being the Sports Village, has the opportunity to name it Historic Dodger Town. Who would own that? I mean, but it's something I'd like to stay with the facility, but you can't really put that into a lease because it's not. Well, they don't have it yet. So
yeah, and that issue was greatly discussed, and Vero Town made clear to us that their ability to acquire that name from the Dodgers is a very difficult thing for them to do, although they are trying. Yeah. And we think that probably Peter O'Malley is the only person who might be able to obtain that. They were concerned that if we started putting conditions about somehow we would acquire that name, it would pretty much eliminate any ability that Mr. O'Malley had to get the name.
And it's all hypothetical. I don't see how you put something hypothetical in a contract.
So they are still trying to get it, and hopefully they will get it. But basically they've said, please don't tie it to county conditions because it will make it more difficult to get that name.
Like that.
Anything further, Commissioner? My previous concern with the liquidated damages really is nil at this point. As you explained, Counselor, there is the legal end of the issue, but just pointing out that we've had great tenancy relationship and an obligation that has been well met as far as the maintenance of the facility, that I can see no concern for having a liquidated damages element in there. I think that we have a great team and looking for a positive future that we'll all be able to enjoy as citizens of Indian River County. Well, we have a motion on the floor in a second. Motion by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by myself. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 4-1 with Commissioner Solari dissenting. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the employment agreement for the new county attorney. Memorandum dated May 28, 2013, found on pages 167 through 172. Councilor.
Mr. Chairman, back on May 21, this board did select Dylan Reingold as the new county attorney, subject to approval of an acceptable employment agreement. I then had discussions with Mr. Reingold in which I sent him my existing contract and said the board would certainly prefer that he accept that contract in its current form, and he had no problem with that. So we have prepared a contract that is identical to my existing, that changes only the name, the dates, the salary amount, which is left blank, and the number of vacation days has been reduced slightly from my current to the amount that I started at 3.5 years ago. The only open issue in the agreement is the amount of the salary. Mr. Reingold and I did look at a lot of data, and in the end his request was a salary of $140,000. I think that was in part based on the Martin County situation. Martin County has almost the identical population to us. They've just approved in April of this year a new county attorney at a salary of $140,000. And in addition, they allowed that attorney to keep doing work for a former client, which will give him an opportunity to earn more money. In our case, our contract with Mr. Reingold says that he cannot do any work with anybody else. So we looked at the Martin County situation was the best data that we had. We also looked at the comparable county attorney salary information that we could get from the Florida Association of County Attorneys, or the Florida Association of Counties. There appeared to be 6 counties which were somewhat in our size range. This $140,000 would fall right in the middle of that. So in any event, he requested, I felt it was reasonable, so I've presented that in the agenda memo. The only other thing I'd point out is, as I said in the memo, this form of contract that we have has been cut up so many times. It is the form that was handed to me when I came here. We changed it, and each time, in the interest of trying to keep the contract simple, we've just left all the remaining unchanged parts in there. But at this point, the contract is reaching the point where it really needs an overhaul. And frankly, I would like to do that before I leave. I think this contract can be approved, and he'd be happy to sign that. And sometime before I leave, I'd just like to rewrite this thing, not changing any of the terms, but just putting it in what I consider to be a more professional format for you to consider after I'm gone.
Well, now, why would, Mr. Chairman, then, Alan, why would we go ahead and put something like this forward now?
To get it done, so that he has, so that you and he have a contractual relationship. He plans to start July 1.
Yeah, but if you want to change this, then why? I understand what you're saying, but in my mind I'm thinking, okay, I've got legal counsel saying that he'd really like to clean up this contract when we're fixing to extend the contract.
Yeah, and I can't get it done between now and when he starts, July 1. I think that, if the contract's been good enough for me, I think it's good enough for Dylan, good enough for the board. But I just think that we as an organization have what I consider to be a more professional form of contract going forward, and that's something that I could address probably in July before I leave.
And I really do appreciate that. I think that I understand what you're saying, but just
I approve this now.
Yeah.
Well, and the answer is because events have brought us to the point where we need a contract for him to start July 1.
Well, without Dylan here, I mean, it would be nice to be able to say we're going to approve this contract, and there will be changes in language made that will not impact the agreement.
Right. The intent is not to change.
Clarify that.
Yeah, the intent is not to change any substantive terms at all. It is simply to reformat, and where it has been rewritten in different places so many times, it just doesn't flow very well.
So there's some scale and boilerplate here.
So basically, we're talking about a matter of form over matter, form over substance, basically.
Correct.
So, I mean, and given that, as far as I'm concerned, that's basically the Section 8 termination clause, which is the most material clause for me in here, which says that the contract may be terminated at will of the county or county attorney upon 30 days written notice of any other party. I mean, I think that stays in there, and that language is clear. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to approve the attached proposed employment agreement at a salary of $140,000 per year.
I'll second that for more discussion.
It's a motion by Commissioner Solari, seconded by Commissioner Davis, and additional discussion.
And Mr. Plotkwich, under where it says terms, it talks about renewals under the same terms. And I just want to reiterate one more time that the changes that you're making are more, are not, I guess, that talking about doing for the next time whenever it comes around is not going to be more substantive. Just to confirm that, because it says renewals shall be under the same terms as this agreement. Or
And if you want to add something that says that, but with the new contract format, I'd be happy to amend the motion to that.
Well, I mean, we could both agree on it. It's in there.
But it's whether he agrees on
yeah.
it.
And I feel comfortable because you're giving me the advice. You've given us good advice at this. So I'm going to go ahead and support it to go ahead and move this forward. But I just want to, in reading Section 7, just want to make sure that you would read Section 7 one more time and just give me the thumbs up before I vote.
Well, the terms of Section 7, the substantive terms, will not change at all.
Okay.
I'm not sure at the moment that any of the language will change at 7.
Okay.
But I just want to, in the end, as I say, kind of reformat it and write it in language that is internally consistent. Right now, the language is not internally consistent.
I'm ready for the question.
Motion on the floor. No further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen.
Bob Thornton is on the right side.
Welcome aboard, Commissioner.
I had to make the motion to bring you guys along.
Next item is on commissioner items. Commissioner Wesley Davis, Vice Chairman, wanted a discussion on the Environmental Control Board, ECHB, which memorandum dated May 28, 2013, found on pages 173. Commissioner Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Had a constituent call me up with a question that I just simply couldn't answer, and it boiled down to why do we have our Environmental Control Board hearing under our control whenever we're only about out of 3 in the state, from what I gather, and I didn't know any of this to be true or not. So I called Mr. Plotkwich and asked him about the question. He said that he had some background in it, but could look into it. And I said, Alan, before you do that, let me see if it's the will of the board, because I don't want to give the county administrator nor the county attorney direction without getting at least 3 votes of support from the board to research it and to spend resources in doing so. So in the process of that, I did get some calls from the health department, and really, I understand they have a presentation, and they asked if they would be able to give their presentation, and I said absolutely, and anybody that would like to speak on that, please feel free to. But really, all I'm after here is does anybody here on this commission want to know how we got to where we are, and have the county attorney look into it and see if what we're doing is the best Environmental Control Board hearing in the state. So that's the reason for me having this on the agenda. And maybe y'all already know the answer since I put it on there. You had
I could give you my opinion if you're looking for that. And,
I'm fine. Yeah.
From my understanding, and I did talk to Alan at length because he has been on that board for many years and got a little bit of the background, and also what the health department folks said. And basically, we're probably lucky that we have local control. It allows us to respond quickly with local people, and it helps protect the general public. And from my understanding is the board acts a lot like our code enforcement board, where the primary goal is compliance, but the fact we have a local board and the authority to issue fines kind of gives them a little bit of a stick if the carrot doesn't work. And, it seems like every day we go to Tallahassee or FAC and we plead for home rule and local control of issues. And I can't imagine us, when we have that, to turn it over to a state agency where we have little or no influence or control over. So, I think DEP has 1 staff member for every 10 counties to deal with this. So I could see if a complaint comes up, it might be a month before anybody looks into it. Whereas with our current structure, probably somebody's out there that day or the next day, so I think we get great response. The cost to the county is minimal. Mr. Zito had a table yesterday, and I think the 4-year average cost to the county is about $7,000 a year. We pay about 17 or 20, and then that's offset by the fine, so the net cost to the county is about $7,000 a year, which, given the local service and response, I think is well worth it. And again, I just can't see us turning something over to DEP that we can control here locally. I think we're in a great shape, and so my opinion is we don't need to change it, and I'm happy with the way it's structured and operating.
Well, with that said, and does it sound like this should be something or could be something that could be folded into the code enforcement? And the answer is I'm suspending certainty here, because clearly these are the things that I would like to have answered and had some questions about, but I did not see a point in chasing an issue that nobody wants to look into. So I'll still, I mean, if you're still of that position and if it doesn't fit and you want to just keep the way it is and not have staff look into it, I respect that. But that was clear. That's just why I put it on here, to see, does it fit in the code enforcement hearings, and can it be all under one committee if it works so well? And I don't know.
Well, I would just say this. I know our code enforcement staff is pretty well maxed out currently. For the $7,000 a year we're getting, we couldn't afford to hire a new code enforcement person to take on additional duties. So I would say for the value we're getting, it's better off served where it is. I don't think we can get that many people doing that job without a lot higher expense of adding to code enforcement staff.
I mean, our code enforcement board is made up by...
Well, not the board. I'm talking more of the staff that goes out and...
No, and I don't know that any of that would change. Basically, if they work so hand in hand, put somebody from the environmental health on our code enforcement board, and if it's... And I don't know. I mean, those are the things that really... Can one committee do all this, and if it's so good?
I think the answer to that question is probably no.
Okay.
One of the things that makes the local environmental control hearing board so effective is, by statute, it is authorized to enforce all of the state laws and rules relating to the environment, whereas your code enforcement board doesn't have that underlying jurisdiction. So
even with our special act of the legislature?
Well, if you went and got a special act from the legislature, you might be able to get that.
No, I mean, as we have it, with our special act of the legislature, you're saying that we don't or can't?
No, what I'm saying is the special act of the legislature that created the Environmental Control Hearing Board gave it jurisdiction to enforce all of the state environmental laws and rules.
Mm-hmm.
That jurisdiction doesn't exist over in the code enforcement side. So theoretically, if you were to eliminate the Environmental Control Hearing Board and tried to get the code enforcement board to enforce DEP rules and regulations or Florida statutes relating to the environment, I don't think your code enforcement board would have that jurisdiction.
Okay.
That's
all right. So we've got I guess by statute or ordinance, we are pretty much bound in the fashion we have to have the two committees or boards, is what you just said.
Under the special act, you are required. It's like you requested it back in 1985, and it was put forth in a special act establishing this mechanism for that purpose, as Peter explained.
Thank you.
And you know what? And when we go to conferences or speak to other commissioners from other jurisdictions, which we can't speak with each other, but in speaking with other commissioners, hearing that their angst with the alphabet organizations as opposed to a local home rule, homegrown situation, it's boundary. It's loud and clear that you're just not going to get that type of service. Commissioner O'Brien mentioned, I thought it was 9. It's 10. 10 counties per representative. It's going to take a long time. Folks, remember the hurricanes. Remember the flexibility we had. We remember that we were making hourly decisions, and that was happening with your local Board of Health. And those adjustments were made when critical decisions had to be made. We now know that FEMA is not going to be the FEMA that it was, and we're going to have to be flexible in our assistance, understanding, inspections, and the handling of such mechanisms with our local board, which would probably be serving the community far better in a local manner. In addition, programs that we've all grown accustomed to, that I see Teddy's here and Julianne Price, those programs are offshoots of the support of having our local board here, and I would be wondering if we would be losing a lot of those programs and a lot of the bite that those programs have. Minor things like when we were able to get folks into a sewage situation, knock out some of the septic tank situations, the water situations. I believe having a local board move things rather quickly as opposed to wait for a representative to travel. And if a hearing had to be made, where would it be made? Palatka? We would have to go to another jurisdiction for a hearing, if there was a hearing. That's my concern too. I asked, would there be a hearing? Counsel, would you know the answer to that if we had an independent person as opposed to the local board that we have? If we were to have a hearing, where would that hearing take place, if at all?
Well, I think the hearings could come up under two different settings. One is under, I guess, a permit setting where, the act being taken is contrary to permit, so there's a permit revocation hearing. I'm not quite sure where that would take place, but Palatka is a good guess. But I will tell you back, I was here when all of this started back in 1985, and the problem that was being dealt with then was when DEP wanted to bring any type of enforcement action, their only real avenue available to them was to go to the state attorney and have the state attorney try to prosecute these claims for them on a criminal basis. And that effectively did not work. And this was all born out of the thought that if that's the mechanism available to us, and if it's not working, what can we do on a local level that will work better? And that was really how, as I understand it, this idea was formulated. I think Representative Padgett, if I'm recalling that correctly, was the champion of that back in the mid-'80s and brought it forward. And I have managed to serve on that. I served from its start in '85 as chairman on a continuous basis until I resigned to take this position in 2010. And, it really has functioned, I think, quite well. Functioned not only on an enforcement level, but on a deterrence level, because the mere existence of this local remedy has put us in a position where we can deal with smaller problems, local problems, that perhaps DEP would never get to. The private septic systems that are not working in a mobile home park, for example, stuff like that. I don't, as county attorney, I guess I'm stepping out of my role as county attorney to make these comments, but, having been a kind of a first-person observer to the process for almost 25 out of its 27 and a half years of existence, it has served the purpose well, pretty much exactly as Peter described.
Thank you, Councilor. A question for Mrs. Zito. We were in discussing the amount of cost factor for the board, and we did discuss, and you showed a chart of where the expenses were, whether they traveled from 16,000, 17,000, 18,000, but on average of about 17,000.
Yeah, it's negligible to the county. In fact, there are years where it breaks even or even yields some revenue to the county. Their total budget for fiscal 2012-13 was $118,833, of which the county funded 14%, 14.37% at $17,000, and we budgeted revenue of 10 this year, but that does fluctuate. But the cost is negligible.
Many years almost at a zero balance. Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to say that from looking at a different department that doesn't have the access of local control like this, and the if you have a unlicensed activity and you call the DBPR in Jacksonville and you say you want to report somebody, I know we can report somebody here locally, but with the demand load of the inspectors being, 25 trips per day or greater in many cases, they don't have the time to go out and chase somebody down and find them. Having a local person that you could task to just go out and find these people and catch them would be very valuable to that department, but having it in place where it's at today, I think it serves a great role and a very minimal cost to the county, but a huge benefit on the benefit side of the local enforcement. And so I'm in support of leaving it the way it's currently running.
Commissioner Solari.
Mr. Chairman, I do know that the people from the Environmental Health Department are here today, and they have a presentation for us. If they want to give it, I'd be happy to see it.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, they already asked me if, would they be able to, and I said I would
Absolutely.
insist on it. But before we get started on that, I still don't have an answer from my constituent. How did we get where we are? And I didn't want to direct staff, but it sounds like that there's been a lot of staff direction or inquiries and such as that, so it wouldn't take long to pull this together. But unless y'all want me to just give them your number and y'all explain it to them, because I can't explain how we got to where we are and answer his question about why are we one of the only few in the state to do this. Not that it's bad. I mean, I think that I'm seeing some things pulled together here.
If you want to ask Alan if he can go back to just before 1985 to see what problems caused us to try to get the special legislation through from Representative Padgett, that would be fine.
I'm good with that. That's the first half of what I've.
That's fine. I don't think it'll take him too much time, but if you don't rush him because maybe he wants to do it in July after.
I'm not in a rush. I just would like to be able to respond to that.
And that would be fine. It's always good to get that information.
Okay.
But it just from the discussion in the last day or so, it seems that most probably there were problems in the county which we couldn't get addressed in a timely manner, that Representative Padgett was willing to take some time and effort to get the special legislation passed, and that gave us a mechanism to address these problems. But that's speculation on my part, so I'd be very happy if he could. But I'd put a limit on his time, too. I mean, say that if he made a good faith effort, if Alan made a good faith effort, and after a good faith effort, he couldn't find the genesis of the problem, that he just report that back.
Commissioner Slaughter, I'll have to disagree with you there. I think we need a motion that Alan cannot retire until that historical date is completed, as well as the new county attorney contract and a bunch of other stuff we're going to throw on him. So.
No, and that was I didn't know how extensive this would be, and so whenever Alan and I had a conversation, I said, really, let's stop before, because if I'm the only one that would like to know how we got where we are, since we're one of only 3 in the state, I don't want to do it just because it's intriguing. I want to do it, A, because I really do want to know, and B, I want to be able to respond to somebody that asked me that question whenever they found it out. And I told them, I don't know.
My guess is Suzanne Bitunex, sitting out here today, she was there at the start as well.
Good.
She was there before I was selected, I think, to go on the board, that initial board. So I think between Suzanne and myself, we can probably sit down and reconstruct it pretty quickly.
And, in addition to that, whenever this comes back up, 20 years from now, which it probably will, perhaps whenever we just take this research and put it with the ordinance, that way they'll know where it came from. Save everybody a lot of time. But with that said, I think Mr. Chairman, with
Yes,
your indulgence.
if you would like to go forward with your presentation, we'd appreciate it as well. And perhaps it'll help with the discussion that Alan has to ensue.
Then it's mandatory after that. I'll talk to Suzanne because I remember when I showed up for my first meeting, she seemed to have some pretty good DEP had to go through the state attorney to get anywhere.
Miranda got that going quicker than Vinny.
Miranda, very impressive. Although we have IT standing by.
That's comforting. Let's see if this works here. We might need IT. Is this alive? Does the toggle work? Does that have to be connected? It's not off and on. Aha. Thank you. Always helps to turn something on. My name is Miranda Hawker, and I'm the administrator for the Health Department. And with me today is our environmental manager, Cheryl Dunn. And I appreciate the opportunity this morning to talk to all of you about our Environmental Control Board. I know we've had a lot of discussion about, well, what happened when it first started in 1985. And honestly, sometimes when you look at a 28-year period, when a board's been created, you lose its purpose. And that is not the case with the Environmental Control Board, Hearing Board. It's never been clearer, in my opinion. And the fact that we're one of 3 boards in the state, being different is not a bad thing. And we are able to offer enhanced services to our county residents that they don't have other places. I mean, one of the hallmarks of our community, and I moved here in 2004, is our environment. We protect the public health, and that's something. There's something to be said for that. And through our presentation, I'm going to review a few key points about the Environmental Control Hearing Board itself, hopefully answer some of your questions, Commissioner Davis. And then Cheryl is going to give you some examples of cases of the board that really illustrate the point. And hopefully you'll receive the clarity that you need. Okay, this isn't going to work.
Can you, just as you do that, what are the other 3 communities? Or I guess the other 2?
I believe it's Hillsborough and Palm Beach, to my knowledge.
And they got up theirs with the special act also, just like we did?
Yes. And so ours was created, as we've already discussed, by a special act of the legislature. It was formed at a time when there needed to be the lengthy process of the circuit court and getting compliance through there. It took too long. It was also a time when utility services were expanding and assistance was needed to promote connection to those services. And the ECHB gives us control in terms of enforcing those state laws. Otherwise, that would have to go outside the county, have to go to other agencies, and would be a lengthier process. We've already talked about it being focused on compliance. This is not a hand-heavy board, as you'll see. It's trying to get people to comply, and that's our goal. And in terms of levying fines connected to the board, the revenue received is about 74% the rate of return over the last 7 years. It doesn't cost the county much money. And prior to that time, enforcement was always dependent on outside agencies, and resolution wasn't a quick process and was cumbersome. And there in the blue is the county expense over the last 7 years, and in the yellow is the revenue from the fines that were collected. And in the maroon color, you see the amount the county health department has supported this board. And I will tell you, there is nothing that we believe in stronger. It helps us preserve the public and environmental health, and honestly, that's what the health department is here for. And as you know, the health department and the county partner on this board, and the county health department is a partnership of the state and county. Without this board, the other piece of that is these complaints would go to all of you. They would go to the Board of County Commission, and you'd be responsible for saying, well, this complaint's going to go to needs to go to the state agency. You wouldn't have a mechanism for the local control and resolution of these issues. What you see up before you on the screen is the interconnectedness of the Environmental Control Hearing Board. And it's not just about one department. It's not just about the health department. It's not just about one department in the county. We touch everything from stormwater and lagoon protection to disease control for the county health department to emergency services, community development, including code enforcement. The board actually expands upon code enforcement, as Alan has said, to solid waste, to environmental health. We also work with the different municipalities in the county, and that is also a broader reach than you would have. So its purpose, we have already talked a lot about this slide. I'm not going to belabor it. All of you seem to have a good knowledge of what goes on with the board. It gives us that timely enforcement for sewage and hazardous waste discharges. These impact the Indian River Lagoon, our waterways, and our ocean. It lets us, as a health department, has prompt abatement of local sanitary nuisances and public health issues. Without this, it would be a much lengthier process. And as you know, to take care of problems, you're much better in terms of mitigation than a delayed response. In terms of our complaint response in 2012, these are complaints that come into our agency as the Indian River County Health Department. We responded to 261 complaints in 2012. Year-to-date 2013, we've responded to 121 complaints. We issued, because of the authority...
Miranda?
Yes.
I'm sorry, but is that on a fiscal year or calendar year basis? Thanks.
Calendar year. And in terms of the notices of violation, which we were able to issue because of our authority under the Environmental Control Hearing Board, we issued 52 notices of violation. Those did not result in ECHB action in 2012, but we were able to resolve issues at that level. 19 cases went on for Environmental Hearing Control Board action. I'm sorry, Environmental Health. I apologize, I'm nervous. But our focus is to generate compliance through that board. In terms of local benefits, hazardous waste storage tank issues are handled through the ECHB much quicker than DEP. We have an immediate response to hazardous waste discharges. One of you touched on that earlier. We go out, actually my staff goes out with fire rescue, and that would be a delayed response. You wouldn't have that with DEP. You wouldn't have that immediate local access. We actually fund a person to be on call 24 hours to respond in terms of that hazmat waste response. And I wouldn't have that authority without the Environmental Control Hearing Board. We staff ESF 10 for hazardous waste. This is something that's not done in other counties by the health department, and it falls to DEP. Likely this would not be staffed in a disaster with a local presence. As Commissioner Fletcher had said, we performed the local DEP function in the hurricanes. We tested public water supplies, we tested wells, and we used our lab. That's something we wouldn't have the authority to do without this board. The health department performed the function of DBPR, the Department of Business and Professional Regulation, to issue a notice to correct to restaurants that were trying to operate without power and without water. DBPR was nowhere to be found after those hurricanes. That was our staff going out to the restaurants. And the board lets us expand our scope to do this. That's something that a service you wouldn't have from the health department otherwise, because we wouldn't have the authority. I talked about the ability to address sanitary nuisances already. It also gives us the ability to monitor businesses that generate hazardous waste. That's small quantity generators like auto repair shops, salvage yards. It's over 500 facilities. It's a substantial amount of businesses. We monitor grease interceptors to protect sanitary sewer systems, and this is a long list of things. But Cheryl has some pictures and some cases she's going to talk you through that really illustrate what these cases are, what it means, gives you a visual representation of the importance of this board, and I think that's key. So the question's been asked, what would happen without the Environmental Control Hearing Board? We'd lose local control. That would revert to the state. And I'm not a state agency, but I represent a state agency. And in terms of the Department of Health, and if I thought that we could do this quicker, we would be more efficient, or we would be more effective, I would be all for this action. But I don't think we can. We're much better at functioning together as the county and the county health department in partnership. None are as efficient as our local board. We'd run into limited enforcement options. We'd have an expanded timeline for resolution. You'd hear more complaints at the Board of County Commissioners. And our ability to respond to issues beyond our scope for the Department of Health would be extremely limited. I thought I'd received the suggestion that it'd be helpful to look at issue and complaint resolution. How does this all happen? And with the current hearing board, what you see on the left, a complaint's received, it's worked through our health department. and then it goes to the Environmental Control Board if needed. But on the right, that's the proposed action, is to revert this back to the state. And you can see there's a myriad of state agencies where these complaints would go, and you'd be subject to each of those state agencies, their processes, how they process complaints. If you can find someone, if you're one of 10 counties, or you've got a person that's handling these complaints and they've got 52 other facilities to go to that day, our county issues are not going to be on the forefront. And at this point, I'm going to turn things over to Cheryl so she can talk to you a little bit more specifically about cases.
I wanted to put, good morning, everybody.
Morning.
I wanted to put a face to our board. This photograph was taken when Steve Snowberger resigned from our board in 2011. But I wanted to put this face, and some of these folks are here today in support of the board. Cynthia Vandervoorde Hall is our attorney representative to the board. Patrick Wather is our engineer. Dr. Philip Glade, who replaced Dr. Zoffer, who was recognized for his years of service. He relocated his business to Melbourne. Dr. Richard Cahoy and Dr. Richard Baker, who could not be with us today. But all these folks, 24, 23, 8 years of experience, a volunteer experience, concerned citizens of Indian River County, giving their all, being able to listen patiently and fairly to these cases. It really is a plus, not only for our citizens, but for the defendants, to not just be put to another state agency of hearings and having to jump through hoops, but to be able to reconcile issues fairly and heard before citizenry of Indian River County that really have a vested interest. So our board are volunteers, and they listen to each case carefully, evaluating the facts and circumstances. Since inception of the board in 1985, there have been 513 cases that we've created files on, which the attorneys have touched. And when you see my Environmental Control Board reports, those basically just reflect the activities of the attorney, because the funding is in support of the attorney to support our function. It doesn't reflect the other work that is done by the environmental health staff in the Department of Health. Out of those 513 cases, 173 of those cases had no associated civil penalties. So you see that they're geared towards compliance. And then out of those cases, 31 of those cases had civil penalties, which were purged and no fines collected. The trend for the Environmental Control Hearing Board has been to substantially reduce fines and compliance of and have suspended penalties, allowing for compliance and allowing for penalties to be paid over time. This is a result because of the changing economic conditions in the county. There are a lot of foreclosures and different kinds of complaints that we've been going on. And again, our main goal is compliance. We have, as Miranda showed in the beginning, our office puts out very many notices of violation and give folks the ability to correct those violations. Along with that, we have many resolutions that don't actually go to hearing, that are approved by the board, where we have stipulations or settlements. And a good example, creative way to allow for businesses to continue to operate. A great example was we actually used the board to approve a stipulation working with utilities to allow for the opening of Wabasso Bait and Tackle on US 1, and we're working with them so that they don't have to immediately connect to sewer, so they can get their business operating and get in funds to pay for that sewer connection. I wanted to show you some pictures of what doesn't go to the board necessarily, because we're able to correct these things very expeditiously. When you have a septic tank failure where the solids are collecting in the tank, but the liquid portion of the sewage effluent comes out to the ground surface, these are some examples of the complaints. On the upper left-hand side, you can see there was a very rainy condition. We had some flooding. You can see the standing water, and this individual thought their septic system wasn't working, so they had it pumped, and the tank popped out of the ground. Again, this was corrected with a notice of violation. And the picture below that with the pickup truck, there's a hose, and they're siphoning their sewage effluent into a ditch along the side. And the picture in the middle, a person had a failing septic system, so they went and it's breaking out by their drain field, and they've dug a little trough so it goes to the edge of the road. And the upper right-hand side, that's the old location of Country Ham and Eggs, which is a restaurant, a very busy restaurant that was served by a septic system, and that's actually sewage effluent going out and flowing towards US 1 and the drainage canals. So what we did here is we worked with them, got them on a pump-out schedule, gave them a notice. They abated the sanitary nuisance. We monitored it, and we expedited with the owner of the property sewer connection. Again, these are examples of cases that the board didn't see, but with the presence of the board being there, we were able to abate. And the one below that, sewage effluent on the ground and underneath a home. And one of the other things I wanted to bring up is that we work with the SHIP program through the county, where we identify sanitary nuisances injurious to health. They work to get the funds to repair their septic system. And of course, the slide it's too bad you can't smell through the slide, but of course, when you have sewage on the ground, that doesn't smell too good. Also, we work with the building department and other individuals with unpermitted work. On the picture to the left, that's actually a drain field repair, and I don't know if you can tell, but it's right along the water's edge where they did an unpermitted repair too close to the water. This is the type of stuff that we are able to correct, having the board and having that ability to give notice and to correct. And the picture to the right is actually working with the building department and the board and our staff. There was a garage that somebody built and then decided to make living quarters in it and put in plumbing structures. And the picture in the right is the septic tank that they had installed, and below that is the drain field that they had installed close to the water's edge. All of that was removed as a result of our action. And I want to re-emphasize the importance of the board and our ability to go think outside the box a little bit and respond to the citizens of communities that have issues. One of the major issues was abandoned homes being used for illicit purposes, whether it's prostitution, dealing drugs. We've found syringes and weapons in some of these abandoned homes, rodent infestations, and Julianne and our PACE program, along with code enforcement, law enforcement, and other community partners, has been very successful in having the demolition of over 40 structures in the Gifford area. And I think that's a great success, and our board was very instrumental in making that happen. I just wanted to give you an example of our upcoming agenda, and because we haven't heard these cases, I can't go into great detail, but we have 4 hearings scheduled for 6/6. 2 of those hearings are actually in Commissioner Davis's area, and I believe he's aware of those. It's on 2 county streets that abut the city of Fellsmere. So we actually, Jason Nunemaker also requested action where we have a house where we have, I believe the individual has been dead for 40 years, and they're dealing drugs out of this house. It looks like they're burning and processing metals out front, and all sorts of things are going on. And they brought in a mobile home that isn't even connected to a septic system. And then they've put in a well that services multiple structures that's only 20 feet from the septic system, and there's no public water in this area. So we don't know where this is going to go, but these are two cases that are going before the board this Thursday. This is another case that's going before the board. This is Mr. Manatee's. This is the second time we've had a case, but the first time it's gone to the board. This is their can wash facility and kitchen floor waste facility being washed out, and it's commingling with stormwater off the roof drain and going directly into the canal behind the facility. And we're working with them to correct, but again, I cannot, these are allegations, and they're going to be presented at our next board meeting. This is an example of how we work with animal control. We've gone out on hoarding complaints and misuse of animals and how waste is being handled. This was a puppy mill with poodles in Fellsmere, and the picture to the left is feces and uncontrolled disposal of animal waste and the hoarding and mistreating of animals. This is a very interesting case, and it goes back to, I believe, 1991. And this is Oyster Point in Sebastian.
The condominiums? The timeshare?
Yes. And they had their own package treatment plant. And in those days, the board actually was instrumental in eliminating many of the private package treatment plants. I think there's only 3 left in the county out of many, many that there were. And if you look, you can kind of see a pipe in that box there. That's actually the storm water. What they did is they illegally piped their effluent from their package treatment plant to the storm sewer, and we put dye in their effluent waste, and that's their waste coming out into the ditch, which went directly into the Indian River Lagoon. As a result of this particular action, they stopped discharging, and this case was instrumental in running the sewer along Indian River Drive, and they are now connected to sewer. This is an interesting case. This is on 49th and Old Dixie. This is, at that time they were Allied Diversified, but Reliable Septic. I don't know if you can see off in the distance, but yeah, that's good, Miranda. They had tanks that they could stabilize sewage in before they took it to be properly disposed of, but instead of properly disposing of it, they were land spreading it here without approval. And when we went out to the site, Mike Galanis at that time didn't realize it was so mushy. It was like quicksand, and he was almost, he couldn't even walk. He was up to his knees in sludge. And they kind of, if you could point to the pile of dirt there, on the other one, yeah, right there. They had heard we were coming, so they were trying to bring in sand to quick cover up what they had done with the untreated sewage, because it really hadn't been stabilized and really shouldn't have been land spread. And so then here they are bringing in more fill and spreading it, and you really can't tell in the picture on the end. They tried to line stabilize the area that they disposed of the sludge. And as a result of that case, they actually got a fine and a suspended penalty, which they actually paid that suspended penalty later in 2004. Now this case is very interesting. This is a chip harvester that was out about 5400 block of 41st Street. I don't know if any of you remember this case or remember this going on. Mr. LaFontaine bought some property, and he bought a chip mulcher, and the piles are huge. You can see the firefighter on the last pile there trying to put out the fires that were created by these chip piles that were going through automatic, and they were automatically igniting from the heat that was building up in the chip piles. Actually, I believe it was Fire Rescue asked us to get involved because they were having trouble responding to these fires, and also the amount of complaints that the county was getting as a result of dust and air quality complaints from the burning and the processing of the chipper so close to development. And this last case is maybe something that you recognize. The Vero Texaco tank abandonment, I believe, happened in 2012, and the cleanup is still going on, the mitigation. And so what happened was, years ago, people installed single-line tanks that were susceptible to leakage. So petroleum products had the ability to go into the groundwater and soil. So the Environmental Control Board was used to expedite the removal of these tanks and to do the cleanups around these tanks, and also in that way to help these folks to get into the cleanup programs that were available at that time, because there was a limitation about getting into those cleanup programs if there was contamination. And I think that's my last slide, and I want to thank you so much for your attention, and you're making it able for us to present today.
And at this point, we appreciate the opportunity to present today. I think that there's a story to be told with the Environmental Control Board about the work that they do, the benefits that they bring to the county, the ability for the health department to address a breadth of issues we couldn't without the existence of this board. We wouldn't have that authority, and the Special Act gives us that authority. And we're able to do it in a timely, efficient way with local control and at minimal cost to the county. And you've seen in our presentation, I mean, what Cheryl just did and the pictures she showed you over the years, concrete examples of the investment, of your investment in return on investment for the county. I mean, it's immeasurable, and as the commercial says, it's priceless. But it really is. You're looking at our environment and our public health. And the Environmental Control Board ensures that we remain a beautiful place to live. Other counties aren't able to do the enforcement we do. They aren't able to issue the notices to correct. They aren't able to have our partnership. And that's something that's a credit to our county and a credit to our residents. But we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Mr. John.
Commissioner Davis.
No, first of all, a great presentation, and I certainly hope that you will attest to the fact that this was not any direction of me to request this from y'all without any of the board members up here saying, hey, we'd like to look into this. I mean, this is something y'all did on your own.
If we can't justify what we're doing and show you the value of a board.
It was just a lot of work that y'all put into it that I don't know. I mean, very
We're
interesting.
happy to talk about the
All right,
Environmental
great.
Control Board.
All right. And with that said, there was I understand how y'all have the opportunity to enforce the laws. Do y'all have the opportunity to facilitate the permitting? And I'll tell you what goes back to in my mind is I remember whenever the Mulligans up in Sebastian was having a problem with it was opening up, and it was something with the restaurants, the DPBR, I'm assuming. Okay, all right. And they were having trouble getting a permit so that they could open up. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Now, could y'all have signed off on that?
No, we can't legally sign off on that because we don't permit them. We just have the ability to get more involved if there's outstanding violations that come to our attention that they're not addressing. But in the case of Mulligan's, I think I actually intervened for you and got staff out there for you.
I remember we did have to call.
So we
I
do
was
have
calling
those
everybody,
contacts.
so you probably were on that list. But I was just, and to be able, and I don't know whether it'd be too much for y'all to do, but to be able to have that at a local level. I mean, if to be able to enforce is good at a local level, I think to be able to permit would be even better at a local level. So maybe we're looking at another special act of the legislature and a conversation for another day.
Yeah, but that one would probably be worth it.
What's that?
That one would probably be worth the effort.
Yeah. I mean, it's intriguing. I understand what you're saying about the local, but ma'am, to be able to be able to permit, not just enforce. And I don't know if we could do that under the same statute.
I don't know. That's a good question. Any thoughts?
No. not immediately.
We want that answered also.
Not immediately. But and I appreciate this. This answer is probably, it wasn't really a question. It probably would have been a question as far as, is it beneficial? But I still want to go back to get the answer that I was point blank asked is why do we? And so I appreciate the work and I'll forward this to the constituent that asked me the question, just in case this becomes a follow-up. But with that said, Commissioners, I really would like to go ahead and make a motion to direct the county attorney to give us basically the evolution of our environmental code board and how it came into existence.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Davis, seconded by Commissioner Solari. Any further discussion?
I don't know if anybody else from the audience wants to speak at this point, or...
And you may have an answer to your question. I don't mean to overstep my bounds from some of the people in the audience.
There's a lot of people here today.
I have no problem.
No, everybody's welcome to speak there, but we can roll on that motion.
Good morning. John Orcutt. Afternoon. I served on the Environmental Control Hearing Board at the beginning in 1985 for about 8 or 9 years. I'm not sure how long it was. And the most amazing thing to me was how many of these cases or situations were resolved when we were sitting at an actual hearing and an agreement would come to light and the parties would walk away and we'd leave the room. The enforcement ability of just having the board itself is an incredible opportunity, and it really, really has worked. And I was really proud of myself having been there for 8 or 9 years, and then Alan said he'd been there for 25 years. I was like very humbled at his patience. But I think as we're really interested in doing something about the Indian River Lagoon, the ability to have an environmental control hearing board to deal with the problems is an enormous benefit. We're learning scientifically that septic tanks in this county are quite a problem, and the science is coming to light that we need to address that in one way or another. But we have a mechanism to address it. Back when you were all considering a fertilizer ordinance, there's a very difficult way to wrap your arms around an appropriate ordinance that has any enforceability. But with this organization, the hearing board or the control board and the septic tank issue, you really have a mechanism to improve the situation in the county. But I also just want to thank you all for endorsing the Indian River Lagoon Coalition a couple of meetings ago, and really want to thank all of you and the county for all their efforts that you're doing towards the lagoon. And I think this hearing board is a very important part to keep working forward with that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Davis, do you have any idea how it got started, though?
I'm sorry?
Do you have any idea how the Environmental Control Board got started? Other than, I understand the act of the legislature. But
the first thing I would do is search out Michael Galanis and Susan Vatunek and Alan, and those three people together, I'm sure with a lot of years of memory.
Anything to make it simple. I mean, I don't want to go back and do a forensic audit of any kind, or all I want to do is just what made it a legislative priority.
I think my memory is it was as basic as how do we address the problems in the county that we have and not get them hung up. How can we handle those problems ourselves? And it's back to county control.
Yeah. I bet you it was something that happened that we weren't satisfied with the response from the state. And I bet you it was a scenario like that, and then it became, and I'm just guessing, then we said, listen, we want a special act of the legislature to be able to do this. And that's just what I'd like to be able to, whatever it is. I mean, if it's not that, I just want to be able to tell.
I would address your question a different way. Is we've been fortunate to have something that's worked for 20-some years. Why worry about how it originated? Because it's really worked. We just saw evidence of that on the screen. And how do we fix those things if we don't have local control?
And
slowly, inefficiently. And if you look at what's happened with the lagoon itself, we've had state and federal agency control over the water quality of the lagoon for decades. And so taking that away makes a lot of sense. I mean, here's an article May 5th in the Press Journal where a gentleman, Drew Bartlett, director of the Division of Environmental Assessment and for DEP, wrote this guest column, and he's telling us citizens what a great job DEP is doing protecting our lagoon, where we lost 63% of the seagrasses in 2 years. The state isn't going to help us. So I would just look forward and say we're fortunate that Michael Galanis initiated this 25 years ago and that we've gotten the benefits from it.
And I appreciate your rephrasing the question, but what I try to do when asked a question, I try to be as direct as I possibly can, not rephrase the question to make somebody look like they're asking me a stupid question. And so whenever, and it was really something that I couldn't answer, but at the same time, if it wasn't something that this commission wanted to know the answer to, hence that's why I just put it on the agenda for 3 votes to get the direction, or give the direction, and that's ultimately where this came from.
I think that if I were going to search out that answer, I'd call Mike Galanis.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
That's very helpful.
Thank you for your time.
It's just what we do. You know, we didn't like Fort Pierce and no mosquito control and blue laws, and we went to the governor and got a special act and created Indian River County. That's just how we do it around here.
Let it happen.
Just let it happen.
There you go.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Vandevoorty Hall. I am currently a member of the Environmental Control Hearing Board. I was appointed in 2010 as the attorney representative. I cannot answer Commissioner Davis's questions regarding its formation in 1985. I, as well as the other board members that were appointed, I believe after I was, we were given as part of the appointment process a copy of the authorizing statute, as well as the rules under which the board operates. And I just wanted to give you a couple of anecdotal observations on my part. And again, keep in mind I'm the attorney representative on the committee. The board. The board also has an engineer representative, as well as a medical doctor representative and 2 members at large. And we are all not compensated for our service on the committee. And the majority of the cases, per my perception, that I've seen since 2010 have been septic tank related cases. I don't know whether that's historically the case or not, but there've, again, probably over 50% are septic tank related cases, although there have been other types of cases. I think my approach to being on the board is to try to give everyone a fair hearing. A lot of people come to the board without counsel, and we take that into, well, I take that into account in the formalities with which they're dealt with. But I think the tenor of the hearing board is vastly different than would be in such enforcement situations in civil court, and I think that's actually favorable to our county such that it is the way that it is.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further? Well, we had a motion on the floor and a second, but we still have one more.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I had not intended to talk, but since a question has been asked that I may be able to shed some light on, I'll share with you what I know. And that is that before this board was, the Environmental Control Hearing Board was created, there was an Environmental Control Hearing Board operating for maybe 7, 8 years down in Palm Beach County, at which time Mike Galanis was an environmental specialist in Palm Beach County. He saw that board work very effectively in resolving environmental and health problems. He then moved up to Indian River County and became the environmental health director up here, and he began encountering problems with enforcement. One of the notable enforcement problems was that the county was expanding its sewage system as development was occurring, and connections to county sewer and abandonment of septic tanks was being required. Mike Galanis then proposed an environmental control act identical to the one that had been passed in Palm Beach County and was functioning so well then, and through the political process he was able to get that done. I don't know if that answers your question, Mr. Davis, but it does shed some light on just how, how this all occurred.
It makes me wonder why, if this, especially on the coastal communities, and we're talking about the lagoon, why somebody wouldn't step forward and put this as an environmental issue in our legislative session for all communities along the Treasure Coast.
Well, that's an interesting thought, because down in Palm Beach County, after this Environmental Control Hearing Board was functioning and operating, I can't remember, I think it was James Watt asked Charlie Batunak to write an act for the entire state for code enforcement, to set up code enforcement boards, and it was modeled after the Environmental Control Act for Palm Beach County. So that same thing did occur for local code enforcement problems down in Palm Beach County and statewide back in the, what was that, 80? When's the environmental, or the, oh, Bob Keating's left, okay.
And you know, I mean, and quite frankly, I dare go out on a limb on this, but you know, we've had the raging debate about the septic tank issue and how they said with the regulations that were recently repealed, you can't help but think that this would be somewhere that would have some common sense in between as far as creating this board in areas of springs that they're concerned about, as well as the areas along the lagoon where things may be flowing in there that aren't treated quite properly. It could be a way of kind of meeting both of those, the concerns of the property owners of the added expense, as well as the concerns of those that it may have deteriorating environmental conditions because of it.
It's certainly possible. Statewide initiatives are also probably hard to get going, but where there's real issues, that's possible.
Thank you.
You bet.
Anything further? Seeing none, there's a motion on the floor in a second. Any further discussion here? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Seeing no further business, meeting adjourned.